Have you ever been underestimated? Looked down upon by the people you care about? It's a strange feeling, right? Being seen as something less than what you truly are, simply because others think they know you. For most of my life, that was exactly my reality. I'm Lisa, a 35-year-old woman who still rents a small apartment in the city. To my family, that was a mark of failure, a sign that I hadn't quite figured it out yet. But if they knew the whole story, things would look a lot different. I've always been the quiet one at family gatherings. My cousins are always busy showing off their latest luxury buys, boasting about their expensive vacations, and one-upping each other about their grand homes and investments. And then there's me sitting back, keeping my thoughts to myself. The funny thing is, they think they know my story. They think I'm struggling, that I'm still just scraping by. But the truth is, I'm not just scraping by. I'm quietly building something they can't even imagine. I own properties across the city. Not just a few here and there, but a whole portfolio, commercial and residential, all part of West Pine Holdings, the real estate company I founded. While they continue to think I'm just a renter, I've been working behind the scenes, strategically growing my business. I didn't need to flaunt it. I didn't need to make noise about it. I was focused on building something real, something that would last. I'm sure you've been there too. Feeling like people don't see you for who you really are, assuming that, because you don't play by their rules, you're failing. But let me tell you, I wasn't failing. I was just playing my own game, and when it's time for them to realize what I've built, they'll be shocked. And you'll see it's going to be a lot more than they ever expected. The family dinner was always the same, an event where everyone tried to outdo each other. It wasn't about food, it was about showing off, proving who had made it, and who had the most to brag about. Tonight, the conversation was centered around luxury estates and exotic vacations, the kind of things most people only dream about. My cousins Preston and Cassandra were leading the charge as usual, detailing their latest acquisitions with a level of arrogance that made my stomach twist. Preston leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine glass as he casually mentioned his new ranch in Jackson Hole. He was practically glowing as he described the property's proximity to some Silicon Valley mogul, as if that somehow made him important. Cassandra chimed in, flipping open her designer clutch with a flourish. She casually mentioned that she had just closed on a vineyard in Tuscany. "Private access to the Mediterranean, no big deal," she said, her voice dripping with superiority. I watched them, letting their words wash over me like white noise. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate their successes, I did. But the way they paraded them in front of everyone made me feel small, invisible, and unseen. I sat at the table nursing my iced tea, keeping my smile hidden behind the glass. They didn't know the half of it, of course. They didn't know that while they were out chasing flash and status, I was quietly building something real. But that wasn't a story I was ready to share yet, not with them. It wasn't the right time. Then Aunt Evelyn turned her attention toward me. She had been quiet for most of the evening, but her sharp voice cut through the conversation like a blade. "Lisa, you've been awfully quiet," she said, her tone laced with both curiosity and judgment. Preston leaned forward, his expression feigning concern, though I knew better than to trust it. "We were just wondering, Lisa, what's your living situation like now? Still renting?" He barely suppressed his smirk. I glanced at him, keeping my face neutral, my voice even. "Yeah, still renting," I said, setting down my glass. They had no idea what renting meant to me. They didn't know that my cramped duplex was a property I had purchased years ago, one of the first under my company's portfolio. But no one knew that, and no one ever asked. To them, I was just the underachiever, the one who hadn't grown up yet. Cassandra let out a little laugh, pretending to be surprised. "I didn't know people our age still rented," she said, her eyes flicking from me to Preston, waiting for his reaction. I almost laughed. If they only knew what I was really doing, if they could see past the image they had in their heads of me, they'd be shocked. But I wasn't about to share that with them. Not yet. I took a breath, keeping my composure as Aunt Evelyn added, "You're 35, sweetie? It's time to buy something real, don't you think? She said it with that patronizing smile, the one that made my skin crawl. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. Real, I wanted to say. Try owning $1 billion portfolio of commercial buildings and residential properties. Try quietly acquiring some of the most coveted real estate in the city and keeping it all under the radar. But I didn't. I just smiled and nodded. Instead, I kept my attention on the table, forcing myself to relax. I like the space, I said, keeping my voice calm. It wasn't about the space, of course. It was about making something work with what I had and doing it on my terms. But they wouldn't understand that. They never did. The conversation shifted for a moment, but I could feel the weight of their judgment hanging in the air. They continued their parade of purchases and investments, oblivious to the fact that I was sitting on something far more significant. But that was fine. I wasn't in a rush to reveal it. After all, they thought I was just a renter, just another face in the crowd. They were wrong, but it wasn't their time to know yet. I could feel the shift in the room when Aunt Evelyn's voice broke the silence. She had been watching me, eyes narrowing with a mixture of suspicion and judgment, like she was waiting for me to say something that would justify their assumptions. It was time for them to know the truth. I set down my glass of iced tea, the clink of the ice against the glass loud in the heavy silence. You know, I began, my voice calm, almost too calm. While you've all been discussing your latest acquisitions, I've been busy too. Their attention snapped to me, and I could see the smirks beginning to fade. Preston raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued, but still convinced I was about to tell them something trivial. I wasn't in the mood to play games anymore. I leaned forward slightly, making sure they were all watching. I'm not just a tenant, I said, letting the words hang in the air. I paused for effect, watching as their expressions flickered between confusion and disbelief. They still didn't get it. To them, I was just Lisa, the quiet, modest one, the one who lived in a rented apartment and never had anything worth talking about. But what they didn't know was that I had built something far bigger than any of them had ever dreamed of. I'm the founder of West Pine Holdings, I continued, my voice steady. The real estate company that's been quietly snapping up properties around here for years. The room fell silent. Preston's smirk faltered for the first time, and Cassandra blinked as if trying to process what I had just said. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, the sudden shift in their perception of me. West Pine Holdings, Preston muttered, almost as if he were tasting the words on his tongue. His voice was no longer condescending, it was a little too curious, a little too cautious. I let the silence stretch, watching as the truth settled in. They were trying to connect the dots, but they couldn't. To them, I was just Lisa, the one who still rented an apartment, the one who lived modestly, the one they had dismissed as nothing more than a disappointment. But in reality, I was the one quietly building an empire out of their sight, out of their reach. They had no idea. It was almost laughable, really. All this time, they had thought I was struggling. They had pitied me for not playing the game the way they did. And yet here I was, holding the cards they never even knew existed. I wasn't just an observer of their flashy world. I had created my own world, one built on solid investments, ethical growth, and a quiet strength that no one had bothered to notice. I kept my tone steady, almost casual, as I leaned back in my chair. I've been doing just fine, I said, letting the words sink in. I don't need to brag about it or flaunt it. I'm not interested in showing off my wealth. I've been focused on something more important, creating something real, something that lasts. Preston and Cassandra exchanged glances, their faces no longer carrying the smug confidence they had when the evening started. There was no more laughter now, no more mocking. They were both speechless, struggling to grasp what I had just revealed. It was like they couldn't fit the pieces together. The Lisa they thought they knew didn't match the woman sitting in front of them. I watched them closely, enjoying the moment. It wasn't about revenge or proving them wrong. It was about showing them who I really was, about revealing the truth behind the image they had so carefully constructed for me. They had assumed I was nothing, when in reality, I was everything they would never understand. "I've been building this quietly," I said, my voice steady and sure. "And now that you know, I'm not going anywhere. West Pine Holdings isn't some small operation. It's a billion-dollar company, and I'm the one running it. So the next time you want to judge me, maybe you should remember that." The room was still, the tension thick in the air. For a moment, no one spoke. I could see the disbelief in their eyes, the realization that they had been so wrong about me. But the best part, they didn't know the full extent of it yet. The best was yet to come. I could feel the tension thickening in the room as I looked around at their stunned faces. They were still processing the bombshell I had just dropped, but I wasn't done yet. The worst part, the part they never expected, was yet to come. Slowly, methodically, I began to peel back the layers of their carefully constructed lies. "Well, now that we're all being honest," I began, my voice still calm but with an edge to it, "let's talk about how you've been running things." The room went quiet. Even the clinking of wine glasses stopped. Preston's face was flushed, and Cassandra shifted uncomfortably in her seat. They were beginning to realize what was happening. "I've seen the financials," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "I know about the inflated invoices, the creative accounting. I know how you've been covering up your spending by falsifying expenses and using company funds for personal purchases." The words came out smoothly, each one landing with a sharp impact. They had no idea that I had spent months gathering evidence, studying the documents they had carelessly overlooked. Preston's eyes widened as he tried to compose himself, but I could see the panic building behind his calm facade. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, silencing him. "It's not just the personal spending either," I continued. "I've seen how you've been exploiting tax loopholes, shifting funds around to avoid paying your fair share." I could feel the shift in the room. This wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. It was dangerous for them. "All of this? It's illegal," I added, letting the weight of the words sink in. I knew they were starting to panic, but I wasn't about to let up. Not now. "The worst part? It's all been happening under your noses, and none of you even cared enough to fix it. You were too busy chasing the next big thing, too obsessed with appearances, to notice the real damage you were causing." I glanced over at my father, who had been silent for far too long. His face had drained of color, and I could see the shame creeping up on him. He had always prided himself on the family name, on his legacy, but now I could see the reality settling in. His legacy was built on lies. "That's right," I said, my voice firm now. "I've been quietly gathering the proof. I'm the one who uncovered it all. And now it's time for you to face the consequences." The calmness in my voice was almost surreal, especially compared to the growing anxiety on their faces. They had no idea how deep they were in. They thought they were untouchable, but now the walls were closing in. Cassandra, usually the one who could talk her way out of anything, finally spoke, her voice shaky. This is ridiculous. You can't possibly—" She stopped mid-sentence, realizing that she didn't have a leg to stand on. It was too late for excuses. They had no defense. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, cutting her off. "You've been taking advantage of the system, taking advantage of people while pretending to be the picture of success. But now, everyone will know the truth." Preston stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. He was trying to compose himself, but I could see his fists clenched at his sides. "You can't do this," he spat. But I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. "I can, and I will," I said calmly. "The audit will go public, and once it does, there will be no hiding from this." The room fell into a heavy silence, the kind that only comes before a storm. They had thought they could control everything until now. But the truth had a way of slipping through the cracks, and now they were exposed. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, the one they had always underestimated, the one they had written off. And now, I was the one holding all the cards. I wasn't the underdog anymore. I wasn't the quiet, overlooked relative. I was the one with the power, the one with the control. And the best part? They had no idea what to do next. The aftermath of everything that had happened was almost surreal. My family, the same ones who had dismissed me for so long, was now looking to me for guidance. The weight of it all wasn't lost on me. I had spent years in the shadows quietly building something that was now not just about my own success, but about restoring a legacy my family had almost lost. It wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about showing them the way forward, about showing them how things could be different. The change wasn't immediate, of course. It took time. The initial shock wore off, and the guilt began to settle in. My father, once so proud of his business practices, now found himself questioning everything he had built. And as much as it hurt him, I could see the shift in his thinking. Slowly, he began to understand that this wasn't about destruction. It was about rebuilding, about doing things the right way. It wasn't easy for him, but he started listening. I led them step by step through the new way of doing things. I talked about responsible investing, about putting the community first. I showed them that it was possible to build something that would last, something that wasn't based on vanity or superficial wealth. My company, West Pine Holdings, had always been focused on ethical growth, but now that message had to be louder. I wanted the world to see that it wasn't just about profit. It was about people. I wanted to show them that real success came from building a legacy that valued integrity, something you could be proud of for generations. It wasn't long before the changes started to take root. We shifted our focus to properties that supported the community, to projects that improved neighborhoods instead of tearing them down for the sake of luxury. We started prioritizing affordable housing, working with local businesses, and ensuring that our developments didn't just make money, but made a difference. The more I worked with my family, the more they began to understand that wealth was not just about what you flaunt, but about what you contribute. As time passed, the shifts became more evident, and I realized something. True success wasn't about showing off your wealth or having the most expensive things. It wasn't about the flashy cars, the designer clothes, or the private islands. It was about the impact you had, the lives you touched, and the values you instilled. My family was beginning to understand that now. They were starting to see that their true legacy wasn't in the wealth they had accumulated, but in the people they helped, the communities they improved, and the integrity they left behind. One evening, after months of turning things around, my father sat down with me. He looked at me a little unsure, but also with a new kind of respect. "I never thought it would take this turn," he said quietly, "but I get it now." That moment was everything. He didn't just see me as the daughter who had disappointed him anymore. He saw me as someone who had helped them all find their way back to the right path. As I looked at my family, I felt a deep sense of pride. Not because I had succeeded, but because I had helped them see what truly mattered. We were still a family, but now we were a family with a purpose. We were no longer defined by what we owned, but by what we created and how we contributed to the world around us. I looked out the window that night, the city lights twinkling below, and I realized that this was the true legacy I had been building. It wasn't about proving people wrong or fighting for attention. It was about creating something meaningful, something that could stand the test of time. And as I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, I understood that success wasn't something you show off. It's something you build, and it's built on a foundation of values that last long after the money fades. As I look back on everything that's happened, I can't help but reflect on the journey that got me here. It hasn't been easy, and it hasn't always been pretty. There were moments when I could have chosen a different path, moments when I could have used my power to tear everything down. But I didn't. Instead, I chose to help my family rebuild, to guide them toward a future where integrity and purpose came before profit and appearances. That decision changed everything. I could have let the truth destroy them. I could have walked away, letting their mistakes take their toll. But I realized that the real power lies in helping others see what's possible, in showing them how to live by values that last. I chose to show them a new way. I chose to rebuild not just for myself, but for everyone who would come after us. And in doing so, I didn't just restore my family's name, I gave it meaning. Legacy isn't something you inherit. It's something you create. It's about what you build and what you leave behind. It's about teaching the next generation that success isn't about flaunting wealth or proving you're better than others. It's about creating something that will stand the test of time, something that will continue to impact others long after you're gone. When I think about the legacy I want to leave, it's not about the money I've made or the properties I own. It's about the lives I've touched and the example I've set. Success in its truest form isn't about showing off or trying to prove people wrong. It's about doing things the right way with integrity and making a difference in the world. I've learned that success isn't about reaching the top at any cost. It's about reaching the top and staying true to who you are and helping others along the way. It's about doing things with purpose, not for the sake of validation or recognition. As I watch my family, I see them beginning to understand this. They're starting to see that their value isn't in the things they can show off or the titles they hold. It's in the work they do to make a difference, the way they treat others, and the impact they have on the world. I'm proud of them, and I'm proud of myself. We've built something together, something that matters. In the quiet moments, I reflect on how far we've come. From the family who thought I was a failure to the family that now looks to me for guidance, the change has been remarkable. But what matters most isn't the transformation, it's the lessons learned along the way. The lesson is that success is about more than wealth. It's about purpose. It's about building something that lasts, something that can be passed down and continue to inspire others. So, as you listen to this story, I encourage you to think about your own goals and values. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? Are you chasing the kind of success that will last? Or are you focused on the short term, on what others can see? True success isn't about appearances. It's about the quiet work, the long nights, and the choices you make when no one is watching. It's about building something meaningful. If you're facing challenges, if you feel like you've been overlooked or underestimated, remember this: you don't need anyone's approval to start building the life you want. You just need to be true to your values and focus on what truly matters. Keep building, keep striving, and remember that the best kind of success is the kind that can't be measured by what you own, but by what you give.